What's up, Latin 2? For my next video, we're going to review some terminology and endings for nouns. If you didn't watch my video on verbs in the previous section, I just want to let you know that I've also included here in the slides the page numbers in our blue Latin 2 book. So if you think that would be a useful resource, you can head to the back of your blue books as you're doing these exercises or as you're reviewing. Let's start with some terminology related to cases of Latin nouns. And the first term that we're looking at is a declension. A declension is a grouping or a family of nouns. All right, think first declension, second declension, third declension. All of the nouns that belong to each of those groups kind of have the same endings, and that's what puts those words together. Now, we're going to talk about three different cases, and a case in grammar essentially means how does the noun function? What does it do in the particular sentence? And the three cases that we studied last year are nominative, accusative, and dative. The nominative case expresses the subject or the doer of an action. It could be the topic of the sentence or just the person or thing who's doing the particular action. On the other end, the accusative case expresses a direct object or the receiver of an action. That is, the person to whom the action is being done in the particular sentence. We talked about both of these cases a lot last year, and kind of the shortcut that I gave you was that the nominative case, at least in the singular, was like the regular form of the word or the regular person's name, where the accusative case had an ending like am, or em. On the next slide, I'll talk about some plurals and some other forms that apply here, but that's kind of a guideline for bringing it all back from the beginning of last year. Now, the last case that we studied was one we studied in the spring, or kind of a distance learning and not all together, is the dative case. And the dative case kind of jumps off the accusative in that it's not a direct object, but an indirect object. And instead of being the receiver of an action, it's the receiver of an action. So let me give you an example of how this indirect object thing kind of works in English. The sentence that I'm going to use is Quintus shows the discus to his friends. Okay, in this sentence, Quintus is doing the showing, so he's the nominative subject. In this sentence, it's the discus that's being shown, so the discus would be the receiver of the action, and so it's accusative. Now, the dative case noun would be the friends, all right, because he's not like he's showing his friends to anyone, he's showing the discus to his friends. So kind of indirectly, the showing affects the friends. The dative case, don't forget, is usually used with certain verbs. There are certain actions, even in English, that we just use this more often than others, and those verbs are the verb to give, the verb to show, and the verb to tell. So think about it. You usually say you give something to someone, you show something to someone, you tell something like a story to someone. That to someone is the dative case in Latin, kind of indirectly receiving the action there. And so these cases, these uses or functions of the word in Latin sentences are expressed with endings. And on this slide, I organize the endings by declension. First declension, second declension, and third declension. So just a little guidance on reading these charts. All right, I have the cases over on the side. They don't change. It doesn't matter what declension. Nominative is still a subject. Dative is still an indirect object. And accusative is still a direct object. But I've also added singular, one person, and plural, more than one, into the mix here. So just kind of giving you an example in each declension. To say that more than one person in the first declension is receiving the action, the ending would be as. Accusative means direct object, receiving the action. Plural means more than one, and the ending that expresses it is as. To say that one person is the indirect object, like two or four, one person in the second declension, the ending would be O. Dative is an indirect object, or that two or four someone sense. Singular is one, and the ending that corresponds is O. And In the third declension, to say that one person is receiving the action, the ending would be em. Accusative is direct object receiving the action. Singular is one, and em is the ending that applies to it. Just a couple things that we talked about last year with these endings. Don't forget that am, and em are accusative, are receiving the action, but remember that it's only one. In stage 8, we saw another set of endings still receiving the action, but now plural, now more than one. Those endings are as, os, and es. Also with plurals, the nominative plural, we saw this back in stage 5, ae is a plural and nominative ending, I is a plural and nominative ending, and es is plural and nominative also. So just be familiar with these endings. We're going to review them as we go. Do your best with the assignment here, and we'll continue to review both this week and next week. My next video will be on adjectives, pronouns, and forms of the verb to be.